Welcome to a new episode of Whiplash Agile, where we focus on the failures that are necessary to be successful on an agile journey. Because there are always valuable lessons to be learned from someone else's struggles and stumbles. I'm Jeff Anderson, your host and CEO of Agile by Design. Welcome everyone to the next episode of Whiplash Agile. I have with me today Troy Magennis. So I'm going to say it. Troy is the undisputed master of lean and agile metrics. Pretty much everything I know about estimating or not estimating, forecasting, prioritizing, modeling, predictability, experimenting, either comes from Troy or has been greatly enhanced by Troy. So Troy is definitely one I've been really looking forward to have on this session. Troy's a master of the Kanban, as demonstrated by his receipt of the Brickell Key Award. Troy has also spoken at various Agile conferences and been a track chair. Throughout Troy's career, Troy, you've been an executive leader, an executive coach. You're also a published author with Addison and Wesley. And currently you offer consulting services through Focused Objectives. You help with implementation, portfolio planning, all the other stuff we mentioned above. Welcome aboard, Troy. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Now you have all that expectation to live up to, right? So,
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah, I mean, it is weird, right? I mean, I think the only thing I add to the industry is a bit more curiosity than most, and the rest just flows from there.
Speaking of curiosity, I'm going to do a bit of like contrasting how you like to approach things, and I'll call it mainstream agile. Your approach is a bit different, especially when it comes to sort of metrics, predictability, forecasting, all that kind of good stuff. If you were to describe sort of the pillars or principles of what makes your approach unique and a little bit different, how would you describe that?
It's interesting. I think that my biggest epiphany was understanding that we can get anything done as long as we start early enough. So I don't think we have a when will it be done problem. I think we have a when will it be started problem in our industry. And that sort of is pervasive around sort of predictability. And a lot of other sort of agile frameworks and doctrines around forecasting are all about sort of trying to get a delivery date. And I think that is at our peril because we've got too much invention for that to ever happen, and we've got too much of a complex system to just sort of say, oh, well, let's divide two numbers together, an amount in the backlog divided by an amount that we currently think that we deliver on average. And so if that makes me weird, I own it. So I think that in my career as an executive, I knew I wasn't being given good information about when things would be done anyway, no matter how much I yelled and screamed and hit the door. So, yeah, I think that if it doesn't work, stop doing
this other approach.
Yeah, well,
you talk a lot about
a pragmatic approach, right? Yeah.
You talk a lot about predictability. It's kind of almost like a bad word in the agile verse, so to speak. In your mind, what do you mean by predictability, and what are some of the things that get in the way of good predictability in teams or organizations?
Well, I mean, getting in the way, it's number one is focus, number two is focus, and three is doing too much so we can't focus. And I think that the predictability is a very overloaded word. So I think when I go into organizations, the first thing I have to get them to do is agree on what they mean by predictability. Is it that I'm not getting what I expected? Is it meaning our estimates aren't matching reality? Is it that we're getting 100 other things, but not the things we said we were going to do? And, I even find that the company is unpredictable in its definition of predictability. And so until they can get clear on what they want and why they want it, it's very difficult to help them out. And I think Don Radisson does an experiment whenever he does an engagement with a company, and he goes in at a very senior level, so it's always the board level or the C-level leaders that he's sort of consulting to. But he asks them, what is the most urgent, impactful project that this company is currently doing? And he gets them to agree, which is a milestone. And
Yeah, that's
then,
something on its own.
yeah, and then he sort of says, now write down on a sticky note sort of how much of a cost per month it is not having that project finished. And there'll be a 50 times range in that room. So even at the C level and board level, what's urgent is fuzzy. And how impactful it not being delivered is unclear. So I think that he's if we can't get it at that level, what hope do we have at a team level? And if you can't get any coherence around urgency, how do you get people to focus on the right things? So I think that that's where I go after predictability. Is I start asking
Coherency
them,
around urgency. Oh, I really like that.
yeah,
I feel like I have something to load. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I have something I can load up into my vocabulary the next day. I'm gonna use that 10 times next week. Everyone, coherency around urgency. I think that's really, really powerful. You talk about agile physics, which I think is a really interesting concept. Explain that to listeners. I bet you that's going to be a new term to a whole
oh
bunch of
yeah,
people
no,
listening to this podcast.
I stole that. I mean, back in around the 1980s, there is a book that came out called Factory Physics, which looked at
Okay.
how long it takes and what you would measure in a factory setting to optimize flow. So I turned that into agile physics, the math of flow, and come up with a set of videos on it, which are things I always would like to teach, but couldn't because people would just glaze over. Or why are you teaching us this math stuff? I mean, this is silly, right? But like unless we understand how our systems build and collectively cause flow to occur, how can we improve them? So I think in the agile physics world, what I've tried to do is take some of the boring known math around things like, example, Kingsman's formula sort of is the formula that would predict that above 80% utilization, systems start to collapse and the lead time starts to grow exponentially.
Above 80%. Okay, interesting.
That's right. That's what we say. But why is it 80? So I was curious, like why 80? Why not 81 or 82 or 85 or 90 or 60, right? What factors cause that to be the point where things start to collapse? And if you look at the formula, and it's not a long formula, but what are the factors in it? Like this number and this number and this number. And different parts of the formula have more sensitivity than others. If I change this one a little bit, whoa, now we're waiting sort of weeks or months rather than just days. I better manage that one. So I think what I've tried to do with the Agile Physics one is to help people understand what inputs matter most to causing an impact to flow and lead time and cycle times. And I mean, we know this stuff because like we've all traveled along a road during peak hour and sort of said, we're not moving very fast, but sort of like where do we how do we apply that in our world? Well, like it turns out there are two inputs that are important. And one is the variability of the cycle time. And that's the one we go after in Agile, hell or high water. It's all about consistent cycle times and driving down cycle time. But there's another one which is equally as impactful, and it's the arrival rate. And if we could send the same number of cars along a piece of road at midnight in a fraction of the time than we do during peak hour, because everyone's arrived at one time to try and use that bit of road. So really what we need to be going after in Agile for predictability is to spread out back to the starting time. The arrival time of work on teams is far more impactful on their flow and lead time and cycle time than anything else. So that's why I go back to my forecasting methodology is all about planning start time, because if we can flow work into a system in a more consistent metered pace, things don't get stuck in that congestion and we end up with low cycle time. And if we have low cycle time, we can forecast it and be predictable. So it all comes back to that bloody start date.
And that goes back to some of your definitions around predictability, which is figure out when you're going to start and then get it done quickly and then get the next thing to start. And so that way nothing gets clogged up.
Yeah, I mean, if you want predictability, that's what it is. But I mean, there's the other side of the executive side where I just need it all done. It's all urgent. It's all become sort of red hot. And how do we work through that? Well, again, you can certainly hurt it by lack of focus again. So focus, 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 right? Set urgency.
Lately, you and Chris Heffley of LeanKit fame have been working on a new product, Predictability at Scale, I think it's called. What is it? What's this product? What was the impetus for it? Why is this important?
Yeah, I think Chris and I had some unfinished business. I worked with him a bit sort of through the LeanKit days when he was doing the Kanban stuff there on forecasting and so forth. And they managed to have LeanKit acquired. So him and I are now just sort of joining together and having a shot at rethinking about how organizations sort of manage strategy all the way through to execution. So, we had something called, continuous adaptive strategy and execution. And we're trying to, reinvigorate the way tools sort of handle all of the coming up with the strategy and the vision and the outcomes, and then driving down focus again all the way through the organization through execution, and helping them understand why it's important doing what they're doing. So yeah, we've got a new tool called Casey, heycasey.io, and we're trying to we're going to be launching that soon. It's still stealth, although this is pretty bad stealth by giving it to you on a podcast.
Whoops.
But we just sort of want to bake predictability into the whole process rather than just have it as an afterthought and a regret, which is what the current tools to do around sort of forecasting. It's taken all my spreadsheets and putting them in a tool. That's what it's bloody doing.
So it's going to be Troy Magennis at scale, digitally and online, in a tool. Amazing. Well, I would buy that for sure. Anything else new and exciting you want to share to listeners? Anything you want to sort of advertise, whether it's your site or your consulting business? The floor's yours.
No, that free training on the Agile physics is there on the focusedobjective.com website. I do training courses on forecasting to try and teach sort of teams and organizations about how to think about and do forecasting. So if anyone wants to do that training, come along. There's some online versions of it there on Focus Objective as well. But thanks for asking. Yeah,
you also have training on how to run improvement experiments and how to think about improvements differently. I think I've seen that as well.
Yeah. The design of experiments and that sort of stuff about how to set up a metrics program inside an organization where it's going to matter and so forth. So yeah, I think that anything to do with data and boring stuff, just look me up.
Amazing. Well, I think you can't come highly recommended enough. Certainly, if you want agile kind of ish or agile oriented metrics and data without all the snake oil, I think Troy is definitely the person to go to. Troy, thanks so much for being a guest. As always, it was amazing talking to you. It's been too long, and I hope we do it again without so much of a pause between them.
Okay, no problems.
Bye, Troy.
See ya.
Thanks again for joining me on Whiplash Agile. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. If you want to connect with me, join me on LinkedIn or Twitter/X. And if you like what you hear, or especially if you don't like what you hear, get in touch with me directly at agilebydesign.com.